Let's take a look at the assignment requirements for the lesson plan assignment. Please do go through this whole video because I am going to be defining what the lesson plan is and the requirements for it and providing suggestions on how you can write up your lesson plan. Now, lesson plans themselves, there are different ways of writing out a lesson plan. If you do a Google search, you will find a multitude of various representations for a lesson plan. So the format that you choose for your lesson plan is completely up to you. I am not being stringent on the format that you choose. However, there are elements of the lesson plan that I do require are represented in your lesson plan. I will also show you one format that I generally use and I have found very effective that you could choose to use if you want. So let's take a look at how we start the lesson plan. In general, the lesson plan, you want to talk about the date and the time for when your particular training module is being conducted. Time is important because that tells me how long it's going to be for, right? Is it a 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it is, time is important. It's also important that I know whether it's a morning session or an afternoon session, so time. The next important thing is learning objectives. Learning objectives are the key to any training module. Everything comes out of your learning objectives, so you have to have very measurable and tight learning objectives that are not ambiguous in any way. So I had the resources in the previous modules for how to write a learning objective. I will be providing feedback on the objective and you will keep refining it till you get a very clear learning objective. Writing learning objectives is not easy, especially if this is the first time you're doing it. But it is a very essential skill. And once you understand how to do it, you'll realize how valuable a tool this is and what an asset it is for you as a competency and a skill set for yourself personally. Okay, so those are the learning objectives. Now, after that, we actually move into the session itself. And in designing the session, what are the things I'll be looking for? Do you have anticipatory sets and hooks? So what does that mean? When you have a group of learners sitting in front of you, how do you start this interaction? Now, if you've attended any training modules, you would have seen icebreakers, right? And that's part of this anticipatory set and hook. And we've been reading about making connections to an adult learner's experience and helping them bring in their previous experiences to connect to the new learning, right? You can do that in this anticipatory set or hook. The rest of this over here, the teacher modeling, guided practice, learning activities, independent practice. Now, these are things I have taken from the lesson planning tool that I provided as a reading for you. These are just suggestions. They don't apply to all trainings and it depends on what kind of a training you are doing. If you're going to be showing them how to use the software, then of course you have to model it and show them how to do it, right? And you might even have guided practice where they try it out and then independent practice. So it depends on what you're actually teaching them. If you're teaching them something else, you might want to, like for example, cultural competency, you might want to give a case study for them that wouldn't be modeling as such. Your lesson plan will also have assessments. And what are these assessments? This is assessment of learning. So in my objective, if I wanted my learners to be able to identify 5 types of cultural competency, then I need to have an assessment that shows me that they actually can do that they can meet that objective. They can list the 5 types of cultural competency. Random example. So what kind of an assessment can I have for that? Do I want to have a short quiz for it in the middle of the session? Do I want them to maybe make a little infographic or a little visual aid showing 5 types of cultural competency? You can use anything you want, but that's an assessment that aligns with your objective. So what I'm telling you here is every objective that you have needs to be assessed, and that's what we call alignment. So the objectives that you have learning activities, and then you have assessments. I'm going to be looking at the alignment between all three. So do you have learning activities and assessments that will help you attain all your learning objectives? And that's what I'm going to be looking at. If there's anything missing in this thread, I will point it out to you. And that's how you create a tight lesson. It's also called backward design. And you can look up that. It's by McTeague, and that's who is a part of the reading that I've given you. So what are resources? Now the resources are the PowerPoints or the slides that you will be showing during the training module itself, if that's how you're doing it. If on the other hand you're just going to use a whiteboard and write on it, that's fine. You then need to kind of talk about what the script is for that. Because remember, this particular lesson plan is generic. It should be created so that it can be conducted by anyone at any time and not dependent on you alone. So this lesson plan has to provide sufficient information. If you're wondering about what kind of a slide it should be or what information to put on it, please review the samples. Finally, you have the section called reflection, and that is a space to allow your learners to bring everything together, and that's usually at the end of the session, right? So it could be something like, what is your big takeaway, or what are your big takeaways, and what is still remaining for you to was there any confusion here? So something that gets them thinking about this whole session, bringing it all together and kind of summarizing it. And that's a time for reflection. Again, how you organize that reflection, you can use any learning activity to do that. I think one of the activities in the readings would be something called muddiest points, something for you to think about. Okay, so let me share a resource that I personally use for creating lesson plans. So what I do with a lesson plan is something like this. So the session name, I always like to begin with what the session is about, the date and time as I mentioned, the learning objectives, which will be listed over here, 1, 2, 3, whatever I have. The learning activities, the breakup of the activities, I like to do it in a table like this. So if I know that my session is going to be 90 minutes long, I'll make sure that this time adds up to 90 minutes. It helps me keep track very clearly. Then you can play around with the timings as well. You might want to give a little bit more for one activity or arrange it up and down depending on how you think it's going to go. And then in the activity area is where I will describe the activity itself. So in the first 5 minutes, remember we talked about an anticipatory hook or the icebreaker. And that's something I would do in the first 5 minutes, or maybe I'm doing a longer icebreaker. I might need 10 minutes for it. So that's the activity, and so it's icebreaker, and then I explain what my specific activity is for it. If there is a little PowerPoint that I'll be showing them as a trigger, I will put a screenshot of the PowerPoint right over here in resource. Or if there are links that I'm using, I will put that link over there. I move into my next activity, which could be whatever it is. Maybe I'm modeling. Maybe I'm standing there and saying, okay, everyone open up your workbooks and let's look at page 3, and this is what we're doing. So whatever it is, that's how I break up the activities. The assessments will be interwoven into the activities itself. Now remember, assessments do not need to be at the end of the session. Okay, that's like a school kind of thing. I teach you everything and then I test you. You can do informal assessment along the way that still gets at what you want to get at. For example, in this course, I'm doing a lot of formative assessments for you. At the end of every module, you submit a little project, you have discussions, and through that, I know whether you have attained the objectives for that module or not. So I'm putting it all through the course. So you can have little assessments all through your activities. Does not have to be only at the end. We also talked about, remember, the reflection. So make sure that you have a reflection space here as well. So I find that I can put all the elements and requirements of the learning module itself within a table like this, and it helps me clarify my thoughts. But again, this is just one way of doing it. If you find another way that is more comfortable for you, feel free to use it. Just make sure that your lesson plan addresses all these elements. And I'd just like to reiterate, when I look at grading criteria for myself as a learner, I always look at it as a checklist. Have I achieved all these at the level that I want to? And then I go, yes, 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 and yes. Then I know I've met the requirements of an assignment. And that's the importance of a grading criteria. That's why I provide it as well. And so that is your learning plan. The lesson plan is, this time around, I've actually separated it into a separate deliverable because this does take time and practice and finesse. It does not come easy. So please do think about it, spend some time and develop a lesson plan. And of course, I will be providing detailed feedback as well.